She chose fame over her boyfriend, the man who sacrificed almost everything for her. Before the applause, before the screaming fans, before the lights, the cameras, and the world calling her name, there was a small room, a cheap microphone, and a man who believed in her when no one else did. Her name was Aisha. Aisha was 25 years old, Nigerian, and undeniably beautiful. Not the loud kind of beauty that begged for attention, but the quiet kind that made people stop and stare without knowing why. Her long, natural, curly hair fell freely down her back, untamed and proud. Her skin carried a warm glow, even on her worst days. But Aisha never cared about beauty. What she cared about was her voice. Music lived inside Aisha like breath. She sang when she was happy. She sang when she was sad. She sang when life felt unbearable. Music was how she survived a world that kept reminding her she had nothing. She grew up knowing struggle. She knew what it felt like to want more and have less, to dream big in a life that kept shrinking her options. Music became her escape, her hope, her only plan. But dreams don't survive on talent alone. They need money, and Aisha had none. That was when Min Jae entered her life. Min Jae was 28 years old, Korean, and painfully ordinary to the outside world. He wasn't tall or flashy. He didn't have power or influence. His clothes were simple. His voice was soft. His presence easy to overlook. But Min Jae had something rare. He had patience. He worked long hours at jobs that drained him completely. Sometimes he worked night shifts. Sometimes he worked weekends. Sometimes he worked jobs that left his body aching and his mind exhausted. He lived paycheck to paycheck, never knowing if next month would be easier than the last. Yet when Aisha told him she wanted to be a singer, he didn't hesitate. He didn't ask how long it would take. He didn't ask what it would cost. He didn't ask what he would get in return. He simply said, "I believe in you." Min Jae paid the rent. He paid the electricity. He paid for food. And most importantly, he paid for Aisha's studio sessions. Every recording, every beat, every producer fee. When money was short, Min Jae skipped meals. When work was exhausting, he pushed harder. When Aisha cried after rejection emails, he held her and told her she was meant for more. At night, in small recording studios with peeling paint and old equipment, Min Jae sat quietly in the corner. He watched Aisha sing into microphones that barely worked, her eyes closed, her soul pouring out. Sometimes he imagined her on big stages. Sometimes he imagined her famous. But never, not once, did he imagine a world without himself beside her. Years passed. Nothing changed. Emails went unanswered. Promises fell apart. Producers stopped replying. Hope became thinner and thinner. Aisha started to doubt herself. "What if this never works?" she asked one night, tears running down her face. Min Jae wiped her tears and said softly, "Then we'll keep trying." He never complained, never asked her to quit, never asked her to choose him over her dream. Until the night everything changed. It was a small industry showcase, a room barely filled, a stage barely lit, a night that felt insignificant. But in the audience sat Kang Joon-ho. Kang was 30 years old, a multimillionaire, and the CEO of a powerful record label. He was tall, muscular, and intimidating. Tattoos covered his arms like warnings. He was the kind of man people obeyed without question. When Aisha sang, Kang stopped breathing. Her voice cut through him. Pain, truth, hunger. He had heard thousands of artists, but this voice carried something dangerous. After the performance, his team approached her. For the first time in her life, opportunity didn't whisper. It demanded attention. Meetings followed, luxury offices, professional studios, real producers, real money. Aisha felt like she had stepped into another world, and slowly, quietly, her world with Min Jae began to crack. She came home later. She spoke less. She stopped sharing her fears. Min Jae noticed, but was silent. Until one night, sitting in their small apartment, he asked the question he had been afraid to ask. "Are you still happy with me?" Aisha looked away. She didn't answer, because the truth scared her. Kang's attention shifted. It was no longer just business. His eyes lingered. His tone changed. His control became obvious. One rejection, alone in his office, he said the words that would destroy everything. "You can have out fame," Kang said calmly, "but not with your. Choose." That night, Aisha didn't sleep. She thought of the years Min Jae sacrificed, the money, the patience, the love. The next morning, Min Jae came home with cheap flowers. He leaned gently and said, "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." Aisha cried in the bathroom, but a week later, she signed the contract. She chose fame and love. Fame did not arrive gently. It came fast, loud, unforgiving. The moment Aisha signed that contract, her life stopped belonging to her. At first, it felt like a dream she had prayed for all her life. Luxury cars picked her up. Assistants called her every morning. Schedules were made for her, not by her. Her days were filled with studio sessions, meetings, fittings, interviews. Everything Min Jae had once struggled to provide, money, access, opportunity, was suddenly everywhere. And Min Jae was nowhere. The first week after she moved out, Aisha told herself it was temporary, that she just needed space, that once things settled, she would explain everything, that Min Jae would understand. But days passed, then weeks, and silence grew where love used to live. Min Jae sent messages at first, simple ones. "Did you eat? I hope today went well. I'm proud of you." Aisha read them. She just didn't reply. Not because she hated him, but because answering meant facing what she had done, and facing it hurt. Her first single dropped 2 months later. It exploded. Streams climbed into the millions. Her name trended. Blogs wrote about her raw voice and unique beauty. Interviews called her an overnight success. Overnight. No one mentioned the years Min Jae worked himself sick. No one mentioned the unpaid sacrifices. No one mentioned the man who believed before the world cared. Aisha smiled for cameras. She laughed on talk shows. She wore designer clothes and expensive makeup. And every night, when she finally lay alone in her luxury apartment, the silence was unbearable. Kang Jun-ho watched everything closely. At first, he praised her constantly. "You're doing amazing. I told you you were special. You made the right choice." But slowly, praise turned into control. He began deciding what she wore, which interviews she accepted, which artists she collaborated with, If she questioned him, he reminded her, gently but firmly, who held the power. I invested in you, he would say. I know what's best. When Aisha asked for a day off, he frowned. When she arrived 5 minutes late, he noticed. When she spoke to male artists too comfortably, his eyes hardened. One night, after a long rehearsal, she laughed with a backup dancer in the hallway. Kang watched from a distance. Later, in the car, his voice was calm but cold. You don't need distractions, he said. Focus. Aisha nodded. She always nodded, because saying no felt dangerous, because fame had become fragile in her hands, and she was terrified of losing it. Meanwhile, Min Jae's world grew quieter. He moved to a smaller place, a single room with thin walls and a flickering light. He stopped working extra shifts, not because life got easier, but because exhaustion finally won. Every night, he sat on his couch and watched Aisha on television. Her smile was brighter, her hair perfectly styled, her voice stronger than ever. But Min Jae saw something others didn't. Her eyes were empty. He not spoke badly about her, never cursed her name. When people asked if he knew her, he simply nodded and said, she deserves everything she has. But alone, in the dark, he wondered where he went wrong. Back on stage, Aisha stood under bright lights, hearing thousands scream her name, and somehow she felt smaller than ever. Her schedule left no room to breathe, no room to think, no room to feel. Kang demanded perfection. If you want to stay relevant, you don't rest, he told her. You work. Aisha stopped writing her own songs. They were written for her now, polished, safe, marketable. The pain that once lived in her music was replaced with performance. One night, after a sold-out show, Aisha collapsed in her dressing room. Her makeup was flawless, but her hands were shaking. She stared at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked successful. She felt empty. She thought of Min Jae then, of his quiet smile, of the cheap flowers, of the way he listened when she sang, like nothing else mattered. Tears slid down her face, but her phone buzzed before she could cry. Kang. Be ready in 10 minutes, the message read. We have guests. She wiped her tears, put on a smile, and walked back into the life she chose. Outside, cameras flashed. Inside, something in her broke. Fame had answered her prayers, but love had gone silent, and the silence was getting louder every day. From the outside, Aisha had won. She was famous, she was wealthy, she was admired. Her face was everywhere. Billboards, magazines, screens. Her name was spoken with excitement. Her voice filled arenas. People called her inspiring, lucky, blessed. But no one saw the cost. No one saw what happened when the lights went off. Aisha learned quickly that fame was not freedom. It was a cage made of gold. Every part of her life became scheduled, every moment measured, every emotion controlled. Kang Joon-ho no longer pretended his involvement was only professional. He decided what she posted online. He decided who could be near her. He decided when she slept and when she worked. And when Aisha pushed back, even slightly, he reminded her of the truth she feared most. You don't exist without this brand, he said one night, his voice calm, almost bored. I made you. Those words stayed with her. She stopped arguing after that. She learned how to smile through exhaustion, how to laugh when she wanted to cry, how to stand on stage with her heart breaking quietly inside her chest. She became an expert at pretending. Backstage, moments before performances, Kang would stand close behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his presence heavy, watching, monitoring. You look tired, he would say. Don't let them see it. So she didn't. She walked on stage glowing, confident, perfect, and the crowd loved her. They screamed her name, not knowing she was barely holding herself together. Every night after shows, Aisha returned to empty hotel rooms or luxury apartments that felt colder than the small room she once shared with Minjai. She tried to sleep, but memories didn't let her. She remembered Minjai sitting quietly in studios, Minjai counting money carefully, Minjai smiling at her with tired eyes and unconditional love. She wondered if he hated her. She wondered if he still watched. Minjai still watched. From a small room with peeling paint and a broken heater, he sat alone most nights with the television on low volume. He watched her perform, watched her interviews, watched her smile. People around him spoke of her like a miracle. "She made it," they said. "She's living the dream." Minjai nodded politely, but he knew better. He saw it in her eyes, the emptiness, the sadness she couldn't hide fast enough. He never reached out again. Not because he didn't love her, but because he finally understood something painful. Love means letting go, when holding on only causes pain. One evening after an award show, Aisha stood alone in her dressing room. The trophy sat on the table beside her, shining under the lights. Makeup artists had already left. Stylists were gone. The room was quiet. She slid down the wall and sat on the floor. Her makeup began to smudge as tears finally escaped. She cried for the girl she used to be. She cried for the man she left behind. She cried for the voice that once sang freely. She cried silently, because even crying felt dangerous now. Later that night, Kang knocked once before entering. "You did well," he said, glancing at the award. "Get some rest. Tomorrow I've busy." Aisha looked at him and felt nothing. No admiration, no fear, just emptiness. That night, standing by the window of her luxury apartment, city lights glowing behind her, Aisha finally admitted the truth she had been running from. She was lonely. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from being surrounded by people who don't love you. She had chosen fame, and fame had taken everything else. Weeks later, after a long world tour, Aisha returned to an empty stage after the crowd had gone. The lights were dim, the microphones silent, the seats empty. She stood there alone, wearing a glamorous outfit that suddenly felt meaningless. This was what no one saw. This was what success felt like when the applause faded. Aisha closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel everything. Regret, grief, loss. She realized something then, too late to change the past, but clear enough to hurt deeply. Minjai loved her when she had nothing. The words loved her because she became something. And there was a difference, a painful difference. Minjai moved on quietly. He found peace in simplicity. He worked less, laughed more. He stopped watching her performances after a while, not out of bitterness, but self-preservation. He kept one thing, the memory of loving someone deeply and opening and closing. Aisha continued her career. More awards, more tours, more money. But she carried a weight no success could lift. And sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet, she whispered to no one, "I chose wrong." But fame doesn't answer apologies, and love, once broken by choice, rarely waits. She stood on the edge of everything she dreamed of, and finding understood the truth no one talks about. Sometimes, success costs more than failure ever could. And the most expensive thing you can lose is the person who loved you when you had nothing.